Okay, well, good morning. As I said, I have chocolate and mints here, so please help yourself. It won't bother me if you get up and come grab one, or I can pass them around, whatever you want to do. But we have them here, so if you need one, come and get it. As you can see, the title of my session is The Poorly Managed Classroom, a direct correlation to your failing test scores. And we all know that failing test scores is not our biggest problem. You have a poorly managed classroom. The biggest problem is that we've got a group of kids, at least one group of kids, who's not being instructed the way they deserve to be instructed. And so the test scores are, it's not good, but the real travesty is that our kids are not being taught the way they should be. And I apologize for my voice. I woke up this morning with a lot of drainage, and so hopefully I'm going to be able to get through this. Let me go back. What I want to talk today about is some common mistakes that I think that we as administrators make when we're preparing our teachers for the first day of school. And then I also want to talk to you about some things that I think we can do to ensure that our teachers have rules and procedures in place so that they can have a well-managed classroom. But first, let me tell you a little bit about me. My name is Delanice Taylor. I was in education for 29 years, 19 of those as an administrator, and then I retired last June of 2016. I'm currently working as an educational consultant, working on classroom management. I've done some administrator coaching and some other things. But last year when I decided to retire, or when I did retire, I had to think about, okay, what am I going to do next? What's in store for me now? Yes.
You keep standing in front of the projection.
Okay.
So we can't see the screen.
Okay. I need an X on the carpet, I think, so I
Just
can
turn your computer.
So I thought, I have grandkids in West Monroe, Louisiana. I have grandkids in Kerrville, Texas. I'll just spend 1 week in Kerrville, 1 week in West Monroe, and that's how I'll spend the rest of my, retired life. And then my husband got wind of that and didn't care much for that idea, so we nixed that idea, and had to come up with something else to do. And really, I didn't need this slide. I just wanted y'all to see the picture of my grandkids. So had to work that in here somehow. So, okay, anyway, in all seriousness, I did have to decide, am I going to stay in education or not? When you retire, the world is, you can think of other things you can do. You can go into selling copiers, for instance. I have a friend who is a very successful copier, sells copiers. She has a copier business, and she offered to have me come work for her. And I thought about it because the money was really good. And so I did think about it briefly, but you know what? That's not my passion. It's her passion, and she does a great job, and she's in Kingwood. If you need copiers, I'll hook you up. But anyway, that's her passion. That's not my passion. My passion is working with kids, working with teachers, and working with administrators. And so as I'm thinking of what can I do, then I thought, well, I need to stay with my passion. So how can I help in education? If that's my passion, how can I help? And so I thought, well, I'm going to use my experiences or my mistakes to maybe help others not make the same mistakes that I did. So to tell you a little bit about it, 3 years ago I decided to accept a position as the principal of the intermediate school in our district, and that's 5th and 6th grade. We have 4 elementary schools that feed into that district, and to feed into that school. And so I was at one of the elementary schools for 9 years, and it was a very successful elementary school, had great staff. We just had a lot of success, and I was very comfortable. I could have stayed there, retired there, and everything would have been fine. But I didn't. I went to the intermediate school, and as I went over there, I found out that they had just become improvement required. And I went in end of July, and still had people to hire. So I was a little crazy. It was a little stressful, but we got our people hired. The last person we hired the second day of in-service. Well, he started the second day of in-service, but we got school kicked off, walking through the halls, monitoring classrooms, going in and out of classrooms. We had probably 20 new teachers, new to our school. Some had come from other places, but new to our school. So that was quite a culture change at that time. But because we had 4 elementary schools that fed into the intermediate school, I would see students from my elementary school in the classes as I was in and out of there. And I kept having that same prevailing thought as I walked through these classes. And that was, how in the world did these kids get so bad? When they were on my campus, that a quarter of those kids were my kids. I'd had them since kindergarten. And they weren't this bad on my campus. So how did they get so bad? And I realized, as they get older, puberty and all that kind of stuff. But this was not that. This was just, they were just not following the teacher's directions in the classroom. And so I began to look at it. And as I followed that group of kids in this one teacher's classroom to the next class, I noticed that it was totally different. They were following directions, they were listening, they were doing what they needed to do. And so I'm trying to wrap my mind around what's going on, and then it became obvious that they had rules and procedures established in that classroom. Those students knew from the moment they walked into the classroom until the moment they left what was expected of them. There was no doubt in their mind what they were to do when they walked into that classroom. And the reason that is because the teacher taught it, the teacher modeled it, and they practiced it in that classroom until it became routine. So they understood what to do. And so then I began to rationalize, okay, this teacher that has all this going on is a veteran teacher. She understands, what she needs to do. And this other poor little thing is brand new. It's just going to take her a little while to get adjusted. I'll make sure she visits with her mentor teacher sometime after school kind of gets kicked off, to just let her know what's going on and to get some pointers. And, in the meantime, I'm going to give her some positive encouragement. Hang in there. It's going to get better. Have some chocolate, whatever. I'm going to be that positive reinforcer to her to make sure that she feels good about herself and knows it's going to get better. I don't know why I'm so nervous right now. Okay, and I keep getting off my X. Okay, so the new teacher meets with the mentor, and they talk about the problem. This is probably a week or 2 weeks after school gets started. And all of a sudden, the problem is that little Susie and little Johnny won't behave. And so then the focus becomes on little Susie and little Johnny's behavior and not on the classroom management piece of that. So then that teacher and everybody is focusing on how can we fix that behavior, not on how can we fix that classroom management issue. Let's watch this clip real quick.
You must be the new teacher, huh? Yeah. Remember, days like today, you'll never forget. So enjoy it. You're going to do great. Thanks.
Someone needs work.
Okay. Yes, she's walking. Well, there's so many things. She's walking in with the kids. She has jeans on the first day of school. We know that's not going to go over well. But I think a lot of times they walk into their classroom and they think that it's going to be this euphoric experience, and that every kid is going to be like that kid, and they can tell them to do something one time, because when they were kids, that's what they did. If they didn't do what the teacher told them to do, then, they were in trouble at home, that kind of thing. So they come in with that preconceived idea, even though they've gone through 4 years of college and had all of this taught to them. I think sometimes reality hits and it looks something like this. And y'all have seen this, I'm sure, but...
There's nothing more important to me than my vacation. So when I need to book a hotel room, I want someone that makes it easy to find what I want. Booking.com gets it. They offer free cancellation in case I decide to go from kid-friendly to kid-free. Now I can start relaxing even before the vacation begins.
Okay, so hopefully none of us have had experiences to that magnitude. I realize it's a little exaggerated, but I'm telling you what, I've had some pretty bad situations, and I'm sure that's why you're in here, because many of you have too. So, and all too often, this is what happens. And then you have an entire group of students, and if that's a self-contained classroom, if this teacher is team teaching, then you've got more than one group of kids who is not going to have the opportunity to learn like everybody else because that classroom is not being managed effectively. So, but here's what I think we do. I mean, that's why you guys are here. You are here today because you're getting prepared for next year. You're already thinking about what your staff development is going to look like. So here's what I think we do at the beginning of the year to make sure that our teachers, especially our new teachers, are ready for school to start. We want them to have a deep understanding of the content of the TEKS they're going to be teaching, and because we want their students to learn at a deep level. That's what we all want. So what we do is we give them a scope and sequence to pour into. We form PLCs, talk about TEKS and best practices. We give them a mentor. We analyze previous year's data. We give them their class lists and have them look at the individual strengths and weaknesses of each of their students. We look at sample test questions. What else do we do? Anybody else? What else do we do? Lots of things. We do lots of things to get them ready. And most of it is curriculum based, most of it. And that's all good stuff. We've got to do that. But to me, that's like furnishing a house before you finish building it. Imagine this house and moving this beautiful furniture in there. Why would we do that? Why would we move that beautiful furniture in there before that house is ready? Doesn't even make sense, does it? But I think that's kind of what we do when we give a teacher all of those awesome forms of instruction to use in the classroom when we really haven't made sure that they finish building their house first. We're so focused on making sure that our teachers understand what they're to teach that we don't have time to ensure that they really understand what classroom management is. I believe that they need to come up with their class rules and procedures and understand what your expectations are before they step into that classroom on the first day. Now, we do spend time talking about discipline and behavior and the importance of building relationships. We adopt district-wide initiatives. Probably many of you either have or are doing Capturing Kids' Hearts or PBIS or CHAMPS. We even tell teachers to turn in their classroom management plan to make sure they have a plan in place. My teachers turned theirs into my secretary. She put it in a folder on my desk, sat on my desk till the second or third week of school, and then I would start looking at management plans, or maybe I would look at one when I had a teacher that had an issue. I had those, but I didn't even look at them until way after school had started. We also talk about the steps a teacher takes before sending a student to the office. They develop those cute little clip charts, you know. They have marble jars. They have treasure boxes. They have end of the 6 or 9 week incentives. All of those are things that they do, and it's all good stuff. Those are things that we need to do. So if all of this is good stuff, then what are we missing? What is it we need to do? And it's like I said before, I believe we must completely finish building our house before we start furnishing with all those good things. Here's what I think an administrator's responsibility is. I think we need to make sure that these new teachers are adequately trained before school starts and have their rules and procedures ready before the first day of school. I think we need to communicate to those teachers that we're going to be in their classrooms the first 2 weeks of school, in and out of their classrooms frequently, and that we're going to be giving them support. Now, I think it's also important that we have that relationship with those teachers so that they don't feel threatened when they're in there, especially the new teachers, because if they see you walking through frequently, it's going to freak them out if you haven't had a conversation with them and let them know that, look, I understand how hard it is to be a new teacher. And the first 2 weeks of school are so important that I'm going to be in there, or somebody is going to be in there to support you. This is not a gotcha. This is not an evaluation. We're in there to support you and to make sure that you're able to get those rules and procedures taught, modeled, practiced on a regular basis. And then, as administrators, if we don't see those rules and procedures being taught, modeled, and practiced until they become routine, then I feel like we need to intervene. Not at the end of the 6 weeks, not at the end of the week, not even at the end of the day. I think right then we need to be able to intervene and say, okay, Ms. Smith, or, you see Susie is trying to get the teacher's attention, and it's obvious that there's a rule posted that how to get the teacher's attention is to raise your hand, wait to be called on. So Susie is not doing that. So you go over to Susie and say, hey, I see that your rule is to get the teacher's attention is to raise your hand and wait to be called on. Can you practice that for me so I can see how that looks? Susie raises her hand, Mrs. Smith calls on her, and so that routine is being practiced and modeled and practiced, and it reminds that teacher that that's got to be done regularly. So now your question is, how do we do this? With all that we have going on the first 2 weeks of school, how do we get into those new teachers' classrooms several times a day, every day for 2 weeks? And this is going to kind of depend on, what your campus looks like. If you only have 1 or 2 new teachers, I would think that the principal and assistant principal could handle that, could be in those classrooms. But if you're like us and we had 20 new teachers, we didn't have enough administrators to be in those teachers' classrooms and deal with all of the other things we had going on the first 2 weeks of school. We just didn't have enough time to do that. So it may require you to enlist some of your non-classroom professionals, your academic specialists, or coaches, whatever you call them, your counselor. You may even have to recruit people from central office to come help you. A caveat to that is, if you do have to enlist somebody else to help, make sure that you train them and show them what it is you want them, exactly what you want them to do in that classroom when they're in there. I have this in red because I just think it's so important that you know that we need to have a presence in those classrooms daily the first 2 weeks to make sure that those teachers are consistently practicing and reinforcing their rules and procedures. It's not easy to do because we have so much other stuff going on, but I think it will help you in the long run. I'm so sorry. It will help you in the long run to be in those classrooms the first 2 weeks. If you can do that and make sure they have a good foundation and they're really getting those rules and procedures established, then it's going to make your job a lot easier. And then you can focus on the content and you can focus on TEKS and things like that later on. So here's my suggested agenda for classroom management training. And this is what I use when I'm doing classroom management training. It's a one-day training. And whether you have me or somebody else come in and do that for you, whether you decide to do it yourself, here's the agenda that I use. And this is on the TEPSA website. It's in my handout on the TEPSA website. So you can use that. Or I have a card if you want to grab my card later. If you need to ask me a question or something, you can contact me. But like I say, this is the agenda that I use. The first 2 things I have in yellow because that's what we spend the bulk of the day on. Those are the things that I feel like are the most important things to talk about and to make sure your new teachers really understand. The first thing is have a plan for rules and procedures and consistently practice and reinforce those. I use these 3 books a lot. The Classroom Management book by Harry Wong, Marzano's Classroom Management That Works, and Teach Like a Champion by Doug Lemov. Those are really great resources, and we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute, but those are basically what I use to talk to teachers about rules and procedures. The other piece of that is I will actually ask them to bring a laptop or some sort of device because they're gonna prepare their rules and procedures that day. They're gonna have those ready so that when they get back to the classroom, all they have to do is print those off and post them in their classroom. The other piece to that is if they already have those prepared, then they can talk to you as their administrator about those so you can make sure that you're on board with what they have and that you'll kind of know what to look for when you're going in their classroom. The second piece to this that I think is equally as important is building those relationships with their students. you know, we sometimes take for granted that everybody just knows how to build relationships, and that's just not the case. Especially in the society that we live in today with all of the technology and the social media, it's just different. And building relationships, I think, is an art. And so we need to talk to our teachers about building those relationships with their students from the very beginning. What's that saying? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, it's trite, but it's true. Yeah, they've got to know that you care to get buy-in to whatever else you're going to be teaching them. And the same way with your teachers, really. But anyway, that's a different lesson. The next thing that I have on the agenda is understanding the importance of finding mentors and being willing to accept input from successful colleagues. I know that a lot of campuses or a lot of districts actually assign mentors to their new teachers, and that's good, because usually those are teachers that are in the same grade level or teach the same content. But I think there's also some merit in having colleagues from different grade levels, maybe who have a different conference period, so that they can come in and observe a lesson that this new teacher is teaching, or the new teacher can go in on their conference period and observe this other teacher and just get some pointers. So being willing to accept input and know that it's not because they're not doing what they need to be doing, it's just because we all need to get better. And so I think that's an important thing that they need to hear about. Okay, the next thing I have on here is learn what an engaging lesson looks like. Engagement is kind of a buzzword in education now. I know that. We talk about it. We talk about it with more than just our new teachers. We talk about it with all of our teachers. But I really think that since this training is really focusing on our new teachers, that we need to make sure they understand that an engaging lesson is not necessarily a hands-on lesson. Too many times I've been in classrooms where they were doing hands-on activity, but when you actually talk to the students, they didn't know what the learning objective was. They knew the activity, but they didn't know what the learning objective was. And so that's not an engaging lesson. That's a hands-on lesson. They're involved, they're not engaged. So we need to talk a little bit about that. Understanding the importance of monitoring. You've got to be up walking around monitoring students. They just need to understand why that's so important. And there's so many issues that they can prevent by being active and up and monitoring. So we'll talk about that. Making assessment easy yet meaningful. We've got to get away from, let's take a test at the end of the week, and to assess our students, our assessment should be ongoing. And so we'll talk a little bit about some things they can do to make assessment easy yet meaningful. And the last thing I have on here is setting your classroom up to accommodate learning. When I first developed this agenda, I had that at the beginning, kind of close to the top. But then, if you'll remember, the teacher that I was talking about, the man that we hired that started the second day of in-service, he was a really sweet man, really nice man. He had horrible classroom management. And so, but you know, we were going, okay, he's trying to catch up. He just got started. We're going to give him a little time. And it just never got any better. So we had him go into some veteran teachers' classrooms to kind of watch and see how they do things. We had our behavior specialist come and work with him, and it just never really got any better. And so he had noticed that some of our other teachers had some creative learning environments set up. They had some standing desks, or they had some of those stability balls. We had some desks on the floor. And those are really cool, and he thought, that's what I need to help my students do better. Well, okay, this was another one of my, blonde people in here, I was going to say blonde moments. Another one of my probably not best decisions was to let him do that, because he's already got a very unstructured environment in his classroom. If I let him bring in seating arrangements that are really unstructured, and if you don't teach your students how to use those. If you don't have rules and procedures for those, it's going to be bedlam, and it was in his classroom. And see, the thing about him is, like I say, he was really a nice man, but his students knew that he didn't have control. And so it was going to take really just a whole lot of intense work for him to regain control of that classroom, or those classrooms. He had six classes that rotated through him. And if you don't think that didn't affect some of the other classes, that even though they were well managed, it took those teachers a lot of time to get those kids back to where they needed to be, because they were so out of control in his classroom. Can you relate to that? Anybody relate to that? So his poor classroom management didn't just affect that class. It affected every class that those kids went into. So anyway, I kind of digressed on that, but that can be a real powerful thing. I did have a teacher, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I had a teacher who used stability balls. She had one for every student in her classroom, 22 kids all on stability balls, and it was amazing. You could walk into that classroom and you could see kids slightly bouncing, but they were focused on her while she was teaching. But the difference was, she had rules and procedures, and before they ever sat down on one of those stability balls, she had gone through and taught them how to do that. She modeled it, she practiced it, and they talked about it for weeks before she ever let them sit down on a stability ball. And so I think that's a piece our teachers are missing, is that they've got to be able to do that. They've got to be able to practice, to teach those things, practice them, model them, and then practice them with their students. Okay. So much of what I've talked about today is based on my experience or my mistakes, but here's what the experts say about the importance of classroom management. Bob Marzano, and this is his book, it's a little one. His is a lot of research-based stuff, and so it's good. It's just a little more intense than these other two. But he says that teachers play various roles in a typical classroom, but surely one of the most important is that of classroom manager. Effective teaching and learning cannot take place in a poorly managed classroom. He doesn't say may not. He doesn't say we hope it can. He says it will not or cannot take place in a poorly managed classroom. And guys, you can do lead forward. You can do all the things that you want to do that are cutting edge for teaching the TEKS and things like that. But if you have a poorly managed classroom, it's just they're not gonna get it, because, and that teacher, the teacher that I was talking about earlier, the gentleman who's just a really nice man, he actually was a pretty good teacher as far as content. He knew the content was pretty interesting, but his class was so out of control, they didn't hear what he was saying because he couldn't manage them. We heard a lot of, he would say a few words and then shh, shh, shh. That was for nobody but him. Well, I think actually when I walked into his classroom, he did it a lot more because he thought that was his management strategy, was shh. So didn't work. I was so tired of hearing shh by the time the year was over. Okay. Rosemary and Harry Wong say that classroom management consists of practices and procedures that a teacher uses to maintain an environment in which instruction and learning can occur. For this to happen, the teacher must have a well-ordered environment. And guys, I think this is stuff we all know. I think we know that in one part of our brain, but in the other part of our brain, we're so focused on getting all of these other things done that we have to get done and making sure they understand about the content that this kind of takes a back seat. And I'm just maintaining that if we make sure that their classroom is well managed the first 2 weeks of school, that those other things will be so much easier to teach them. And then Doug Lamov, he has a great book on Teach Like a Champion. It's really a good book. He has one chapter on classroom management, but the rest of it is really just best practices and teaching techniques and things like that. So it's a really good book for not just your new teachers, but for all teachers. I think I've given that a couple of times as teacher gifts. So that's a really good resource. Okay, we invest a lot of time into our teachers, and turnover is really hard for many different reasons. But we need to do what we can do to make sure that they don't get to this point. Yeah. Some of you may be too young to remember this, but
First day,
Yes,
I'll take care of her.
thank you.
You know, kindergarten is like the ocean. You don't want to turn your back on it.
They're okay. Don't worry. Everything is under control.
Aren't you going to break up? No, 2 more days of this, and you'll quit.
well, and unfortunately, once they get to this point, they will either leave, and it's September or October, or worse than that, we're going to have to remove them because they won't leave. And then we'll have to replace them. And then the ones that really suffer are the students that have missed out on education, but because they deserve someone in their classroom who can teach and manage their classroom properly. So the other thing I want to say about this is if you've been in that classroom the first 2 weeks and you've supported that teacher in her classroom management or his classroom management, and you've intervened when you needed to intervene, and you've been in there and you've helped that teacher the first 2 weeks of school, and by the week 3 or week 4, you see that it's still not good, and you're still going to have some of those that are like that, then it's time at that point to put them on a growth plan. You don't wait until December or January. You go ahead and start that process right then, because those kids are going to suffer. And they're not going to just suffer that year because they have a poor teacher. They're going to have gaps the following year. And guys, that's why you're having issues. If your scores are not good, that's why you're having issues, because you have 1 or 2 teachers who had really poor classroom management. And it affected that group of kids. It affected them the next year, even though they were in a teacher's classroom who the next year they got into a really good teacher's classroom. And don't we do that also? This kid was in Miss So-and-so's classroom, so we need to make sure we put them in a really good teacher's classroom this next year so they can catch up. Well, they don't. They have gaps. And I get that some kids will catch up, but not everybody will. And that's why our test scores begin to suffer, because we have these pockets of inadequate teachers. And in no other field do they allow teachers or people who are ineffective in their jobs to stay there. But I think as educators, we're such nurturers. And I don't know if you've ever done the Strengths Finder thing to check and see what your strengths are. But my number 1 strength is developer. So I am all about helping people grow and learn. But I guess one of the things I've come to realize is that some people just aren't, and they don't need to be teachers. And so if I've given them all of this support the first couple of weeks of school, because after all, they did go to college for 4 years. So it's not like they're brand new to this field. But if I've given them all of this support, then I need to just realize it's not going to get any better, and I need to go ahead and start taking steps to make sure that those kids don't suffer any more than they already are. And because how many of you sat in on interviews where you thought, this person is going to be great, awesome. So you can't wait for them to get started, and once they do, you realize, oh my gosh, they knew what to say, but they don't know what to do. And So you can interview really well and hopefully, you have good luck on that, but you never know until they get in that classroom how they're going to be. And so that's why I think, especially for our new teachers or even teachers who struggled the previous year, the good thing about education is it's a new year every year. So if they struggled the previous year, if you can put some of those things in place to see if they just needed a little help with classroom management, that second year, if it's not better, they need to be gone. So, okay, well, that's all I have. Do we have any questions or comments, anybody? I do have cards. If you want to ask me anything later, I have cards up here, or my information is on the handout that's on the website. So thank you all for coming. I apologize for all the glitches we had, but thank you for being here.